So, by the end of episode 6 of the Wheel of Time show, The Flame of Tar Valon, we finally saw how the show has written out Barney Harris as Matt Cauthon. Now, while watching this ending, it was quite obvious, if you know what to look out for, that this was kind of very much a rushed kind of re-edit, a rehashing of the original ending that they had. And I would presume and surmise and guess that they originally obviously were going to have Matt go along with them to the Eye of the World, as was stated in the episode. Now, speaking of the Eye of the World and what they've changed, at least for this 6th episode, I'm going to go over that in a separate video because that merits itself a video to be discussed about, because that changes a lot. What's happened to Shayul Ghul and, all of everything else that happens within that sort of space, having the Dark One there is kind of a big deal. And I'm hoping there's a quite easy and simple explanation for that. But I digress. So, as we could quite clearly see, I believe there's certain shots within this ending which were obviously reused over and over again as a way to showcase Matt's reluctance to come with them into the ways. And of course, by the end of the episode, it looks to us like the Waygate finally closes in on them and he no longer has the opportunity to, go with them to Thaldara and then eventually on to the Eye of the World. So, with that being said, I think the beginning of that sequence of events, I think, was how they planned to have it play out. Because I think it's quite plausible for what they've done with Matt's character throughout this first season, where you could see and understand why he would be a little bit hesitant, because his whole kind of arc, up until the point of the Shadar Logoth dagger taking over him to a certain degree, as we all saw, it was all about getting back to his sisters. As we know, they've made slight changes to his story, and they've included how his sisters were very important to him, a lot more than in the books. And so that natural kind of hesitations that he had about, venturing with them into the Eye of the World would of course come from the fact this would be taking him even further away from his two twin sisters back in the Two Rivers. And it was always his mission to kind of get back to them, as we saw by the end of, I believe, episode 3, when he first met Tom.
Need money to get home. Thought you might have some. Not like he needs it.
So you can quite clearly see where they were going to begin with. And I think what would have happened if, Barney Harris stayed on as the character of Matt Cauthon, we would have eventually most likely just seen him run into the Waygate and then kind of go along with the group. But of course, as we all know, Barney Harris left the show, and so they've had to do a rehash of this episode 6's ending. Now, what was interesting to me is, as we already know, they had 2 kind of lockdowns where they had to stop shooting, and it was during this block of episodes 6, 7 and 8 where they had these 2 shutdowns. And we know for a fact Barney Harris came back at least to the first reopening and was able to carry on shooting the episodes. Now, what we do not know is whether he came back for that second one, and just judging from what we've seen in this final edited version of the episode that aired yesterday, it seems to be the case that he did not return for that second one, and so we can surmise it was a very kind of quick and abrupt exit of the show for Barney Harris. So that left the showrunners, the writers, the director and editors for this episode in particular to come up with a way of having the character exit the show, and it kind of will make a little bit of sense. And of course, with everything that went on, they've done it to the best of their abilities, and I think they did as reasonable as a job as you could expect of them with what they were kind of left with to work with. It was quite clearly, especially after they get to the Waygate opening, after Moraine has opened it, and most of the gang except for Matt entered the Waygate, that was all kind of the natural course of events that they wanted to take. But then it starts to get very, weird, just with the editing and the, continued repeatedness of using the same shots from a little bit earlier in that scene where Matt looks a bit hesitant, I think, because they didn't have the actor there to kind of change the way they were going to end that show. They had that episode, they had to come up with a way of having him leave. And so what they did, to me and my mind, is they continued to reuse those clips where he looked like he was questioning whether he should go with them into the waygate or kind of turn around and head back to his sisters. But what really, really, initially struck a chord with me in terms of like, whoa, this is where we're going to see the last of Barney Harris as Matt, was when I believe it was Rand, he turned around and saw that Matt hadn't entered yet, and he was kind of way off in the distance. That to me almost looked like they, implanted that as a kind of green screen or blue screen effect, and it was from a shot a little bit earlier that they would have used if they had, continued with the normal course of the episode. And so they've looked like they've, green screened or blue screened, I don't know which one of the two they would have used, and then had that shot of Matt, way off into the distance. And it maybe possibly could have been, CGI as well to a degree, because it's so far off. That was the first moment where I was like, whoa, what's going on here? This is different. This is interesting to a degree, of course. Because as we all know, in the books, they all go to the Eye of the World, and that's what you would have expected in the show if the normal course of events occurred. But as we all know, that's not the case. And so this is when it begins to kind of have that kind of jarring effect of how the edits went. I think they had to gather all the other actors and actresses back onto the set and kind of re-act out that scene where Matt does not join them, and then we've got kind of those rough edited cuts of Matt looking hesitant together, and they've tried to kind of bridge that all together to the best of their ability, and they did a stand-up job with what they had, as I've already said before. So yeah, that's obviously how, and most likely, unless I'm completely off the mark here, is what we're going to see as the last moments of Barney Harris as Matt Cauthon. Now, I do not want to leave this particular video here. Let's end it on a really, positive note, because Barney Harris, he did an absolutely fantastic job as Matt, throughout his time on the show. And I think all of us, we are going to obviously be very sad, as we were before even watching any of these episodes, to see him go, because everything we'd seen up until that point was just kind of spot on Matt. That's how we all kind of imagine Matt. So kind of having to go on this journey and watch Barney Harris, take on the role and become the role of Matt is, a sad situation to be in. But, he did the role justice. He did everything spot on, especially with the changes. I really felt his connection with his sisters, and then obviously with the young Greenwald girl in the farmhouse. I think you could really see how he had a, soft spot and connection for like the young children or the young girls that he would meet, if they kind of reminded him of his own sisters, and so he would feel kind of protected over them. And I think you saw that at the end of that third or fourth episode, where the whole family unfortunately had been killed by the Fade. So yeah, everything that Barney Harris did, I thought was fantastic. Just from the kind of quips we got from him, the jokes we got from him, it was just Matt. And I've never felt like I was watching someone play a role. I always thought and felt like I've been watching these characters just be brought to life, and you kind of lose yourself in the world and forget the story to a certain degree of what's going on. And of course that naturally occurs with the fact that we didn't know completely where they were going with the story, because there's been quite a few changes, which I am very happy with. I never want to see a show where I know what's going to happen at A, B, C, D, E, F, G, So it was really nice. What can I say? Barney Harris did a fantastic job, and it's a shame to see him go, but we have Donald Finn, and it's going to be interesting to see what awaits with his portrayal of Matt. So yeah, that's where I'm going to end this video. Right guys, I hope you've all enjoyed it. I thought it was really interesting just to see what the showrunners and the editors for this particular episode did with what they had. But yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed the video. If you have, of course, please leave a thumbs up on the video. And if you have any comments, of course, do leave them down below as well. Right guys, thank you all for watching. I will catch you all later in another Wheel of Time video.